Hi, you guys. Okay, so this is our last lesson on appealing to logic, and right now we're going to talk about what's known as inductive reasoning. Okay, and essentially, this is the type of reasoning that you probably are most familiar with if you watch crime shows like SVU or Criminal Minds or Law and Order. Dun dun. All of those. Okay. But essentially, what inductive reasoning is, it's this. It begins with a question or a hypothesis, takes into account factual evidence. Okay, there's that requirement again, and then it ends with a conclusion. Okay, that's inductive reasoning. Ask the question: Who stole the cookie from the cookie jar? Right? And then you're like, well, let's take a look at the evidence. I see crumbs. I see a messy face on that little boy right there. Ooh, is that chocolate on the corner of his mouth? And then it ends with a conclusion. Little Johnny, did you steal the cookie out of the cookie jar? All right, and he's still chewing, right? Okay. It's not as always neat and tidy as a syllogism in deductive reasoning. However, if you use it correctly, it can lead to truth and it can help you argue effectively. So let's take a look at this example right here. Question: Who stole the key to Mrs. Pike's midterm exam? Well, let's take a look at the evidence or the facts. Marshall was the last person to leave the room. Miss Topkins, the teacher across the hall, saw Marshall standing near Mrs. Pike's desk after the bell rang. When Mrs. Pike came back into the room after her hall duty ended, the test key was missing. Marshall has a failing grade in Mrs. Pike's class. Marshall and his best friend Kiara are the only students who scored 100 on the exam. Now, when we read this in first period, some kids were yelling, well, don't they know you're supposed to miss a couple of questions so it doesn't seem so obvious? How do they know to do that? Anyways, logical conclusion, based on all of the evidence, Marshall stole the exam. Okay. Now, there may be some people saying, well, but what about? There's always going to be some variables, but the evidence is overwhelmingly against Marshall. Now, like I said, yes, inductive reasoning is more familiar to you because, of the courtroom dramas and television. However, as often happens on these shows, you'll see some of the pitfalls of detective work. Usually, or namely making the wrong conclusion due to missing evidence. Take a look at this example here. Who loaded acid metal music onto Felicity Purehot's iPod when she was out of the room? Evidence. Well, Chris likes acid metal music, and Chris sits at Felicity's table. So I guess Chris did it. He loaded the music on her iPod. This is what's known as jumping to conclusions. Okay, highlight, circle, underline this part down here. When someone comes to a conclusion without enough evidence, he or she is jumping to conclusions. Imagine jumping from the last piece of evidence, Chris sits at Felicity's table, to the conclusion in this example, right? How ridiculous is that? Okay, so that is inductive reasoning. When we come back next week, we'll do a little activity to kind of help you practice with inductive reasoning, okay? Okay, go ahead and get ready for your exit ticket. You're going to leave this with the sub before you leave. And your exit ticket is going to look, well, it's the one that's entitled Syllogism Summary Slip. It's a little half sheet of paper that you should have received already. I don't have it on the camera. Let me see. Yeah, this is not it. Okay. So basically, like I said, it's the syllogism summary slip. It's on a half sheet of paper. Just follow the directions. It's really easy. In the box below, create a simple syllogism you think is both valid and sound. Be sure to label your major premise A, minor premise B, and conclusion C. Like I said, please leave this with the sub, and we will talk about it when we return. Okay, if you have any further questions about anything that, any of the lessons today, just send me a message on Remind or here, make a comment here on Schoology. All right, I hope you enjoyed this flip classroom lesson, and I'll see you guys next week.